Welcome to Season 3 of Conscious Conversations, where we aim to inspire deep and meaningful interactions that grow into a community of practice that is committed to healing, resilience, and expansion. I am Mabato Monsi. Welcome.
All right, welcome to Conscious Conversations. Thank you so much, Mabato, for inviting me to your Season 3 introduction. For those of you who don't know, I'm Tebe Monte. I'm Mabato Monte's brother. And yeah, I'm really excited to be having this conversation with Mabato to discuss just the learnings she's had from Season 1 and Season 2, talking to her guests, the value that she's provided the Conscious Conversations community, and what we can look forward to in Season 3. So I think, let's jump into it, Mabs. How are you doing? How are you?
Thank you so much, Tebe, and thank you so much for doing this with me. Conscious Conversations journey has really been amazing. Season 1, we focused on very specific tools to help us understand ourselves better. We spoke about values, we spoke about mindfulness, we spoke about family constellations as a tool people can use to, work on their ancestral healing, and many other tools that have been helpful for me. And our Season 2 was mostly focused on Africa and indigenous knowledge systems. We spoke about education in the African context. We spoke about agriculture. We spoke about the family unit, as we know, in Africa, and I think the diaspora, what racial segregation has done, or anti-Black racism has done. It has really broken families in Africa. And so there's quite a lot of work we need to do as we journey on this path of healing and discovering who we are when we are not trying to be white, when we are not trying to exist in a society that deems whiteness to be the only thing that matters. And so I'm excited about the Season 3. I'm excited about the guests. So we have global or guests from the global community who will be sharing with us their perspectives around healing. We'll be speaking about fear. I think many people do not understand what fear is, and they do not understand how fear can often literally keep people prisoners in their own lives. We'll be speaking about the Great Invitation. And the Great Invitation is not for only us who have been called into the journey of Ubungoma, but the Great Invitation for me is more about how God has actually invited us to trust Him with our lives and our existence, and what that can actually mean in our lives. And many other guests who I think our community will really find interesting, insightful. We will be speaking about the body and how to heal trauma that is trapped in the body. I think a lot of the time we don't see how disconnected we are from our bodies. And I cannot imagine existing without being able to connect with my body, to feel everything that my body is sensing. I think there's just so much we don't know about how to live in harmony with all of our senses. Whiteness or modernity has taught us that we've got 5 senses. But of course, in African traditions, in African culture, we know that there are more senses the human body has got. And that is why we've always been able to perceive other worlds, and what westernization, colonization have done to us African people is that it literally has called that ability to connect with the non-visible world. It has called it all sorts of names. around mental illness. There's a lot we do not understand about the non-visible world, but African people have always understood and have always lived with what cannot be perceived with the ordinary eye. So I'm very excited.
Brilliant. And I want us to first get into what it is that what called you to start this community and to start having these conscious conversations. Do you mind taking us through, the genesis of that idea so that anyone that's listening to this really understands what it is, the value that you're trying to bring to their life and the journey that you're trying to take them on from the genesis of the idea when you started season 1 and, now into season 3, how maybe that has evolved or changed? Do you mind sharing that with us?
So I think like most young Black women, I was also into the idea that I wanted to be like Oprah, growing up. And then, I started walking my spiritual journey and understanding myself as a spiritual being, that I was initiated as Sangoma in 2021, which helped to shift quite a bit of things in my life and to gain a better understanding of who I am and what I wanted to share with the world. Conscious conversation is my way of helping the world heal. It is my way of sharing the tools that have helped me heal, and I want to share it with the world. Because I think a lot of things are complicated, but it's really not that complex, especially when people are open to sharing some of the tools that have helped them. Conscious conversations to me is about community, is about creating the safe space that I needed, right, and that I did not have. Conscious conversations is about changing what we consume through media. I think, we all have got access to media, but how are we using the media for our benefit, for the benefit of our communities, for the benefit of Black people, with obviously understanding our history with colonization, with oppression, and with not being able to express ourselves. So it's part of my calling. I think it is a tool I am using to share my gifts and my calling with the world.
That is so beautiful because I think a lot of us are on sort of that healing journey now. I think people find their way onto the healing journey in different ways. For some people, it looks like going back into your histories, your family histories, and trying to understand yourself through your lineage, the events of your lineage. For some people, it's, working through those, childhood traumas. For other people, it's, using those techniques that you spoke about, centering yourself in your body, exercising, eating differently, eating well. What tools from season 1 and season 2, or from the conversations that you've had in season 1 or season 2, have you started really integrating into your own life, into your own spiritual practice, your own being?
So I think values are very, very important, and I don't think many people understand what their values are. And I had to, for myself, figure out what my values were so that I could live in alignment with who I thought I was, who I believe I am, and to continue doing that. I think there are a lot of things that hurt us in life, and sometimes that makes us change, and that causes us to be inauthentic to who we actually are. So values, for me, is a very important subject. And what do I mean about values? So a lot of us, a lot of the time, will say, I love, or one of my values is trust. One of my values is compassion. One of my values is love, right? But what happens when the people in your life do not espouse the same values? And I'll speak about trust as an example. When I say I'm a trustworthy person? What does that mean for me? And we get tested a lot, in life, with how we respond to life, the challenges that we find ourselves in, and how we choose to respond tell a lot about what we say we value and what we actually are. Going back to the issue of trust. So I've believed myself to be a very trustworthy person. And I'll use a very not controversial, but I'll use a very personal example of how we don't understand ourselves a lot of the time. I was obviously married. And when I got married, I wanted my family to work. I wanted my marriage to work. I was raised by a single parent. And so I wanted that, a nuclear family for myself. And I tried for years. And at some point, I found out that there was infidelity in my marriage, right? And for a while, I tried. I even went to therapy. I think what a lot of women tend to do, we tend to think that the problem is us a lot of the time. I went to therapy. I worked on my marriage. And it just got hard, It got hard. I was lonely. And I had an affair. Right? And I believed myself to be a trustworthy person, or a person who valued trust, right? But because my partner at the time broke my trust, it made me vulnerable. I felt lonely. I was going through all these things. And then I broke my own trust to myself by cheating back, right? And so what do values teach us? I had to go back and reflect on what my values are, despite what he was doing, and find a way to keep that integrity within myself, right? And that for me meant leaving, because I didn't want to be that kind of person. Right? And so that is what values actually teach us. When you say you are loving, you're kind, you're generous, you're trustworthy, you are honest, what happens when other people are not behaving or responding in the same ways? In what ways are we then challenged to maintain that integrity, to maintain what we say our values are? So that's an example of values. And then mindfulness was was also an amazing tool. I had already started meditating and being aware of my thoughts, because I think that is what mindfulness really is: being present to our thoughts, being present to our bodies. And I think a lot of the time we are not aware of our thoughts, and that is why the mind can run rampantly in our minds, or over our lives, because we have not mastered the art of actually managing our thoughts and not allowing the mind to be overriding our thoughts. We can choose our thoughts. So mindfulness was one of those practices that I had to cultivate quite a bit, in terms of being aware and being present. And from season two was amazing. I learned a lot about agriculture and its connection with spirituality. We spoke about education, the fact that our education system in South Africa, and I think in the better parts of Africa, is not responsive to the problems of our time. And that is why we get people who have degrees, but they're not able to solve the problems of their communities, For me, an education that does not enable us to think in ways that help us solve our problems is not an education. And so I think we have a long way to go in terms of getting education right. I think for many years we've been subjected to particular narratives that have sought to dumb us down, narratives that have disconnected us from ourselves, from our families, from our communities, and from the earth, you know. I think a good education is an education that will help us understand the connection between each other, the oneness that we share, not only as African people, but I think as the family of humanity, including all of nature. I think that is education. I think we have a long way to go. And so that was what season 1 and 2 were about.
I want to dive into what you just said at the end, because I love how you've broken it down into, like, I think it was like 3 or 4 key values: education, your connection to the earth, mindfulness. But I think a very interesting theme that's coming through there is spirituality. What does that mean to you? Is there, how have you evolved in the process of, you know, having conscious conversations as a community, having the podcast, and learning from the different guests that have come on? What would you say has been, you know, the takeaway in terms of what your understanding of spirituality is?
Spirituality is what we are. And I think anything different has been an attempt to reduce us as human beings. And it started with Christianity, with the missionaries coming to Africa with the very specific intention of removing us from understanding who and what we are as spiritual beings. For me, spirituality is about what I believe is possible for me. For me, spirituality is about what I believe is possible for you, for us. For me, spirituality is what helps me live aligned to my purpose and God's purpose for my life. For me, spirituality is really what nourishes me. I look back, and I love Facebook for this. I look back on my Facebook memories. Well, from time to time, they'll send me the reminders. Like 15 years ago, I posted about why trusting God is important. I posted about why being true to yourself is important. 15 years ago, I knew to pray for wisdom, strength, and courage, you know? So I think I've always had this knowing, without knowing, that I was one with God, and that the only thing I had to concern myself with is strengthening that belief and that connection, because once that is strengthened, then we show up differently in the world. I think at some point I forgot what that was, and I think that was during the period of my marriage in particular. I forgot what that relationship meant, that connection between God and myself, what that meant for me. And that is why emotions like loneliness, emotions like feeling like I needed validation from other people, that's why they became bigger in my space, right? In my life, in my head, in how I saw myself. I forgot those things. And I believe, you know, when we go through difficult times in our lives, that's an opportunity to redirect our focus and what we choose to believe in. And so I've had enough disappointment in life to know that the only person or source that I can completely rely on was God. And for me, strengthening and cultivating that trust and my faith has put me in a place where, and I think we had this conversation a couple of days ago, where I am fearless literally fearless about everything, about my approach, about what I do and how I do it. This connection, this deeper relationship with God also frees me from thinking that I am responsible for the results of my efforts, So I'm now able to do things I love doing without being attached to the outcome, because that's not my work to do. That is God's work. My work is to praise Him and to help His children understand who they are, to help His people heal and recover. And anything else that comes out of that, He and the ancestors must sort that out. And so that is what spirituality has done for me. And it continues to do for me. It gives me peace of mind because I'm not concerned with other things. I just do my part. I know Mabatu is this tiny being, and I just do my tiny bit. And God and the ancestors will take care of everything. And I think that's amazing. And I wish that for so many people, because for me, it gives me such peace of mind.
Are there any guests that have challenged your views or contributed in a way that anchored you even more deeply in the belief that you have?
I think, sure. Yes. So one of our upcoming guests, Michael Fisher, he's a 76-year-old man living in the United States, and he has studied fear for over 40 years, if I'm not mistaken. And his understanding of fear has confirmed so much for me that I am now looking very deeply into how I understand fear and how fear plays in one's life or plays a role in one's life. Because we've always been taught, and this is spoken about in very casual ways, to say there's love and then there's fear. In the Bible, it says you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve two gods, right? So if we believe in the God of love, then why are we so fearful? And so many people, I think, do not understand how fear, literally traps them. I see it in women. Women will stay in abusive marriages where they are unhappy, but because they are scared of doing life on their own, because they don't know if they'll be able to pay the bills, if, they'll still drive the same car, they stay, But for me, the question is, do you really, really, really have trust over that man? Do you have trust in that man more than you have trust in God? Or if people don't pursue their passions, for example, for me, the question then around fear would be, do you not believe that the idea, the dream that God has planted in your life, or do you not believe that God can make it possible? Because He has planted that idea or that dream in your life. So what are you doing to make sure that you make that work, or you take the steps that you need to take in order to meet God halfway? I recently came across a saying that said, or a text, and they said, God acts on our every step. And that is what faith is, right? So you take your first step and then God moves. But if you don't take the step, you are not giving God an opportunity to show you who He is in your life. So many people get trapped by this fear and they don't do things because they don't know. I don't have enough money. It's far, or I don't know these people. We find all sorts of excuses to not do things in our lives. But I think that is a lot of the time anchored in fear. And so I am looking forward to the conversation with Michael. I think it will really bring a deeper perspective into what fear actually is and how it has imprisoned many people.
And I think it also disconnects you from yourself. So I think, yes, so absolutely what you said about its ability to paralyze you, is 100% true. And then you actually don't make any efforts. You can't move in a direction, and, therefore God is not able to show up in a way that you have put your faith into what it is that you believe God is able to do in your life, and so that God can show up, you know what I mean? But it also disconnects you from yourself. So even the knowing, the brilliance, the values that you were speaking about, the ability to exercise them consistently, I think fear also disengages you from the ability to do that. So I'm really looking forward to your conversation with Michael, because I've also gone through seasons of my life where, fear has been something very interesting to observe in retrospect, the impact that it has had on my life, and then now also deal with it on a day-to-day basis in the choices that I make. I think, for example, on my end, one of the major things was coming out, so the impact that had on, my relationship with you, with like our family members, and not feeling like I could have a deeper relationship with my cousins who I grew up with as siblings, I think was a major part of my story of, being gay, being afraid of coming out, living in that fear. But then since sort of like releasing it and trying to move in faith to say, these guys have seen me grow up my entire life, so I think that they know that I'm an okay person. This just happens to be like one of those things. So I look forward to that episode. I want to talk to you about podcasting, because you are in your third season, which is, I'm going to, compare that to almost the third trimester of this community that you are birthing, which I love the metaphor, because you are Maba to mother of the people. That's what your name means. What have you learned about building a community through podcasting? What is it that, I think you've taken away from just the process of building this platform, inviting people to go on this journey with you, to listen to the conversations that you're having, and the value that you are trying to, bring to the world? What have you learned about building a community?
And I'm getting emotional because I'm learning that Black people are doing a lot, but we are doing a lot in silos. And that is why we are not able to scale our things. I think the wound that we share as Black people has been so deep, so deep, that we don't trust each other, that we are not willing to bring our resources together to work towards a common purpose and a common vision. And that is why white people in particular, or the colonizers, are able to still get away with the things they get away with. I've spoken to incredible people who are doing amazing work in their respective fields, but they do not have resources to be able to scale. I've learned that as Black people, we are the biggest consumers of everything. Yet we are the least resourced. And yet we cannot focus enough on what we want. And maybe that is because we haven't imagined that. We don't have a collective idea of what a liberated Africa looks like, or what Black culture really looks like, right? Maybe that is because we have not imagined that dream, what we could be when we are not trying to be white. So I've learned that people are doing things, but people are doing things alone. And I think that is because a lot of the time, Black people do not trust each other with their things. A lot of the time, Black people disappoint each other and are unforgiving towards each other when those disappointments do happen. And that breaks my heart, because I feel like there's so much we could do together. I think we are brilliant in so many ways. So that's number one. Number two, I am learning about how to produce, man. So it's a skill I didn't have. So I'm learning what it means, and maybe it goes back to that Oprah idea, right, that I had growing up, to say one day I want to be like, oh. But I've learned how to put together content, how to research, and the work that I do on Conscious Conversations is very much aligned to my work as an academic. That I'm pursuing a PhD, and my focus is on ancestral trauma and the Ndu, how the Ndu in us has been wounded. And so being able to have an aerial view of where the issues lie in Africa, in Black communities, and being able to develop 1 hour conversations around that for me has been exciting. So it has sharpened my skills as a researcher, knowing who I want to speak to, for what purpose. So being able to discern has been one of the, I don't want to say skills, but it's something I've had to cultivate, to say which voices do I want to amplify, because media is a powerful tool. So for what purpose am I using my presence in the media or my media platforms? I think it's also very important for us as Black people to be intentional about the things we are doing. Why are we doing the things we are doing? Are we simply doing it for the likes, for the following, or do we actually want our work to be impactful? And what does impact look like for each of us? So season 1 to now has really taught me a great deal. It's also helped me understand how to bring value to others. As I told you before, I'm now working with Flatline Productions. It's owned by a Black guy. And, this collaboration is so important to me because, again, it gives me an opportunity to work with other young Black people who have got a vision for Africa, who do not want to look American, who do not want to look white, who want to proudly represent their roots and where they come from, because we can be great, man.
That is so beautiful. And I love the point that you made, so many points in there that were really powerful. The one about, community building amongst Black people and our trauma, because I think that's the underlying issue within our community, is that there's a lot of trauma and healing work that needs to happen, which then that trauma, results in the mistrust and unforgivingness and, disappointments that occur in how we relate to each other and the way we interact with each other. So in terms of the community building, I think I share and understand what you mean by that in the journey that I've had trying to build a community on my podcast as well. Some of the conversations that I've had, I don't think have necessarily directly been about trauma in that particular way, or healing in that sense. But when people share their stories with you, you can't help but pick up that, a lot of us are the same. Like, a lot of us have the same core challenges, core issues. The core trauma is similar. I think it manifests in different ways in our lives. But what it also does is it makes it difficult for us to connect with each other because we struggle to be vulnerable with each other. To the point that you made about, disappointments, I think one of the things there is, for example, even in your workplace, in your relationship with your friends, small things like not being able to meet commitments, and that creating that kind of disappointment. If you've grown up with that core wounding that makes you believe that being vulnerable in your ability to come to someone with the truth and you be perceived as insufficient or weak because you are not able to make a commitment to you, sharing or being vulnerable in that kind of way is a sign of weakness, then you are not able to handle disappointing people very well because your attitude changes in the way that you approach addressing disappointment. And I think those kind of core woundings are like similar. Like if you've been raised by a single parent who was in survival mode and always needed to just make sure that the lights were on, that you were surviving, there were things probably in your childhood that you picked up as a child as disappointment, and no one gave you an explanation for that. People just sort of like let it slide that as a child you could be disappointed. And so you sort of grew up with the belief or the knowledge that disappointment is something that other people will sort of like just get over. And so that's how you sort of handle it in the world, even as an adult. So I definitely have picked that up in the individual stories that people share about their lives. And I'm so glad that you also raised it on your side as like a theme, So that's powerful. And I think even the more you have these conversations, I've realized as well, you sort of pick up that these themes are just, run parallel in our lives. And then the point about the media, I think was really amazing because I think the one thing that African people all over the world can identify with is our incredible ability to tell stories. I think, that is something that comes through our culture, our art, our music, the media, So I want to just say kudos as well to you for, creating your media platforms and building those. But I want to just touch on the importance of storytelling because, so you, are an initiate. Well, you've graduated. You are a Isangoma, a healer, and part of your initiation process is storytelling, whether it's through people's lives, through the bones, speaking over people's lives, seeing, through people's lives and, guiding them on a healing journey, but also in the songs that, you sing, in the different ceremonies. They tell stories. The songs themselves share stories of Africanness, of identity, of who you are, the praise names. What do you imagine, the future of storytelling on the African continent to be? And, how important is it that, it contributes to our healing as people?
So I think in order for us, firstly, I think we have a wealth of wisdom, of stories, of mythology to share with the globe, right? But I also think that we have not grieved what has happened to us. We've not grieved what we have lost. We just have not had the time to grieve. So we can actually come to grips with what we have actually lost and what we need to recover and how that will inform the stories we tell going forward. One of the guests I have in season 3, Greg McNeil, he's a Black American man living in the United States, and he's doing his PhD, which is titled currently Afro-Indigeneity in Ancient America, right? And the gist of his research is to prove that indigenous or black people existed in America before Columbus got to America. So black people are essentially indigenous to America. But because we do not have the history, I think for many of us, the history we have of Africa is surrounded, or it starts from slavery. That is the core story of Africa. And I think we need to change that. We had a life before slavery. We had a life before colonization. What was that? What did it look like? So as people are becoming more and more initiated into Ubungoma, which I think is a story on its own, the reason why there is this awakening at this point in time. I think there's a lot to unearth around just that one particular theme. But I think many of us need to go back and rediscover. Firstly, we need to recognize that we need to grieve because we have lost a lot. Whether it's from a connection perspective, whether it is around what our families were. And I mean, in African context, each family had a gift to bring to the world, to its broader community. We need to remember that, to say, what did the Munzis, what are we about? Bakwena. What is our story? And in order to properly do that, Tebe, we need to go back and we need to be able to recognize what we have lost and allow each other to grieve that, and then to rest and then decide what other stories we want to tell. Yes, it's great. African people, stories are amazing. But what stories do we want to tell? With which history? Which history are we relying on? Because the history that we know now, I don't think it's a true reflection of who we are. And so I'm also very cautious around the narrative of story, because there is so much to unearth. Who were we before our ancestors were colonized? People will talk about, hey, your mom will slap you behind the back. It's sort of like created as a culture, as a black cultural thing. And I don't think that's that. To say a black man, wajola, it's like a norm. I don't think that's that. To say in black families, it's normal for a mangwane or malume to be somehow. I don't think that's true. So where do we start in terms of unearthing the true stories of what it means to be African? That will inform the stories we tell going forward for the ancestors that are yet to be born. So I'm very cautious around issues of story because I think so much has been diluted around Africa.
Beautiful. And I love how you've captured the grieving and healing and then deciding on what the new story is, because I think that's so important. Whatever our history is as Africans, I think we can all recognize that there's been a considerable amount of pain. And so grieving it individually, grieving it collectively, however we come to a place of healing, I think is so important so that we can imagine a new, better future for ourselves as Africans, but also for the planet and the global community. I think that's just a lovely way to think about the contribution that we can make towards humanity and the thriving of the human species and race. Mabatu, thank you so much. I actually want to ask if there's anything that you want to share about your upcoming season 3, that we haven't perhaps covered in the conversation so far.
I don't think there is a lot. I think this was a beautiful conversation. Thank you for your very deep questions, because being able to ask the right questions, and that goes back to the whole education thing, right? In season 2, one of the things we spoke about is how people a lot of the time taught what to think and not how to think. And it goes into, when you know how to think, you understand why asking the right questions is important, So being able to question deeply, and there's a right word for it. I think it's called critical thinking. Being able to really, really think helps us to ask the right questions. So your how you have conducted this conversation, how you have led it, has really been nice. Thank you very much. I don't think there's more I would want to add because it might reveal too much. But what I do want to say is that we have an amazing lineup. Speaking with African people of color, mostly from the global community. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the growth of this platform, to the growth of this community in such a short period of time. And I'm excited. I'm excited for this growth. I'm excited for being able to share what has helped me heal, what has helped me navigate my own journey as a young Black woman, because I think the things that affect us as Black bodies also are influenced by our gender, right? So as a Black woman, my struggles are very different to a Black man, So, yeah, thanks, Tebe. Thanks a lot for being part of my season 3 journey.
It's been an absolute pleasure being part of your season 1 introduction. And I hope that anyone that's watching this is really excited about season 3, goes back and watches, listens to season 1 and 2, has those takeaways, insights, and aha moments from the previous seasons. I'm really excited about, the growth of your community and this platform. I think the work that you do is amazing. And I think with every guest that comes onto the platform, there's even more insight, to reach a broader community and to give those pearls to the people that specifically need maybe that one piece of wisdom that might have been delivered by someone that you wouldn't have even, thought might bring that particular insight, but they found them on your platform as a guest. So thank you so much, Maotu, for, giving me the honor and the opportunity to interview you for your upcoming season. And I wish you all the best. I think it's beautiful, the work that you're doing in the community, and even, the effort that you've put into even studying further in order to equip yourself with the information and the knowledge that you need to really grow this community and add even more value. I think it's just brilliant and a testament to your commitment to, the journey that you're on and the journey that you want to take all of us on as well with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye.